You have approximately 48 hours. Not 48 hours to prepare. Not 48 hours to think about it. 48 hours before the most electrically charged planetary ingress of this decade rewrites the operating frequency of everything you have been quietly enduring. Most people will feel this as restlessness, as irritability, as a sudden, inexplicable urge to burn something down and build something better in its place. They will not know why. They will blame the weather, blame their partner, blame the coffee, but you are here. And that means your instincts already knew something was coming before your mind had the language to name it. On April 9, 2026, at 3:36 in the afternoon. Eastern Time, Mars, the planet of war, will, raw desire, and physical initiation, crosses the threshold into 0 degrees Aries. Its home, its throne, the first degree of the first sign of the entire zodiac wheel. And when a warrior returns home after a long exile, the ground shakes. You are about to feel that shaking in your bones. Before this window closes, you will understand 3 things. First, what this event actually is, why it carries a weight that most astrological transits simply do not, and why this particular Mars ingress is not just a 2-year cycle repeating itself, but a once-in-decades convergence that changes the rules of what becomes possible for the next several weeks. Second, which signs are most affected, and not in a vague, generalized way, but in precise, unavoidable terms, what this transit is demanding from each of them, and why the signals you have already been receiving in your body and in your relationships are not random. Third, the specific practice that transforms this volatile cosmic ignition from something that scatters your energy into something that launches you forward with surgical precision. This is not a warning to frighten you. This is a briefing to arm you. Stay with this until the end. Everything you need is here to understand why April 9th is different from any ordinary Mars transit. Then you have to understand what 0 degrees Aries actually means at the level of cosmic architecture. The zodiac is not simply a circle. It is a living sequence, a complete story of consciousness moving from raw, undifferentiated spark all the way through to total dissolution and return. Aries is the beginning, the absolute beginning, 0 degrees. Aries is not just the start of Aries season. It is the Aries point, the precise degree that astrologers across centuries and traditions have identified as the most world-sensitive, most publicly resonant, most collectively activating degree in the entire 360-degree wheel. When a planet crosses 0 Aries, it does not just enter a sign. It enters the engine room of the zodiac. It plugs into the original current. And the planet crossing that threshold right now is Mars, the planet that rules that engine room. This is not a planet visiting someone else's house. This is the owner returning to a house that has been accumulating unfinished business in their absence. The lock turns, the door opens, and everything inside rushes toward the light. But this ingress does not happen in isolation. It happens inside a stellium, a tight cluster of planets already gathered in Aries, like an army waiting for its general. Saturn is there. Neptune is there, freshly ingressed into Aries itself, for the first time since the mid-1990s. Chiron is there, the wounded healer, sitting in the sign of the warrior and asking every injury you have carried in silence to finally be acknowledged. The sun is there, amplifying the entire stack with the raw voltage of solar identity. These are not small planets. Saturn is the architect of fate and limitation. Neptune is the dissolver of illusions. Chiron is the keeper of your deepest, most carefully hidden wound. And now Mars arrives to lead this group, to give it force, to give it direction and physical momentum. You have to understand what this means. It means the next several weeks are not just emotionally significant. They are structurally significant. The decisions made during this window, or the decisions deliberately withheld, will leave marks, not metaphorical marks. Real-world, life-altering directional marks, that your future self will trace back to exactly this moment. The last time Saturn and Neptune were both in Aries together was the mid-1990s. The last time Mars entered Aries and found this many outer planets already waiting there, at this scale, at this density, is beyond recent memory. What you are standing at the edge of is not a trend. It is a threshold. There is something else. Within 72 hours of Mars crossing into Aries at 0 degrees, it will move quickly toward a conjunction with Neptune at 2 degrees, 39 minutes of Aries. That conjunction perfects on April 12th at 10:28 p.m. Pacific Time. Think about what that means at the level of lived experience. Mars is raw drive, aggression, physical hunger, the will to act now and ask questions later. Neptune is the ocean. Neptune is everything that has no edges. Dream, illusion, spiritual longing, grief that has no name, desire that has no clear object. When these two planets fuse together at the very beginning of Aries, the line between your ambition and your calling blurs completely. The line between what you want and what you were made for becomes almost impossible to distinguish. This can be disorienting, and you may feel a surge of motivation so large it has no clear target. You may feel called towards something you cannot yet fully see. You may feel the impulse to act without knowing exactly why. This is not confusion. This is initiation. Mars conjunct Neptune in Aries is the moment the warrior realizes they are not just fighting for territory. They are fighting for something sacred. Hold that. We will return to it. And simultaneously, Venus has already entered Taurus, her own home sign, as of March 30th. She is settled there, stable, sensual, deeply grounded in the material and the beautiful. And Mars in Aries, ruled by Mars, in mutual reception with Venus in Taurus, ruled by Venus. These two planets are holding a conversation across the sky that runs beneath everything happening in the coming weeks. Desire is in dialogue with action. Beauty is in conversation with force. What you value is speaking directly to what you are willing to fight for. Pay attention to that conversation. It is not happening in the background. It is the undercurrent of every significant decision and every significant relationship moment you will encounter between now and the end of April. Venus in Taurus steadies the Mars in Aries fire. She does not extinguish it. She gives it a reason. Without a reason, fire burns everything. With a reason, fire forges. You have already felt the physical signals. If you have been honest with yourself, you have noticed them building over the past several days. The tension headache that settles just behind your eyes, as if your skull is trying to contain something too large for it. The jaw clenching, sometimes at night, sometimes during conversations, where you are holding back what you actually want to say. The restless legs. The inability to fall asleep even when your body is exhausted, because your mind is running at a frequency that refuses to slow down. The sudden surges of heat that move through your upper body without obvious cause. The flushing across your face and chest. The sensation of your scalp becoming hypersensitive and alive. These are not symptoms of anxiety, or rather they are, but the anxiety is not psychological in origin. It is cosmic in origin. Aries rules the head, the scalp, the face, the adrenal response, the jaw, the impulse before the thought. Every one of those symptoms is your body registering the approach of this ingress before your conscious mind is caught up. Your nervous system is an antenna. It picks up planetary frequencies, the way skin picks up heat from a fire that is still several feet away. You feel warm before you can see the flames. That warmth you have been feeling is Mars at the door. Now the door's opening. Now pay attention. This is the section where you find your sign. This is where the transmission becomes personal. Not every sign feels this transit the same way. Not every sign will face the same demand, the same gift, or the same danger. Listen for yours. Do not skip ahead. Each sign's activation is precise, and the details matter. If your sun, moon, or rising sign is Aries, what is happening on April 9th is not a transit that affects your life from the outside. It is a transit that rewrites your sense of self from the inside. Mars is your chart ruler. It governs the house of your physical body, your instinctive self-presentation, the way you move through a room, the way you begin things. When Mars enters 0 Aries, it enters your first house of identity and will, when it finds Saturn, Neptune, Chiron, and the Sun already waiting there. This is not a gentle nudge toward growth. This is a complete restructuring of who you understand yourself to be. The version of you who survived whatever the last 2 years demanded. The version who learned to shrink, to manage expectations, and to be reasonable about ambition. That version is being asked to step aside. Not permanently, not without gratitude, but aside. Because what is being born in Aries right now is older and more instinctive than the adaptations you built around it. The Chiron component of this stellium means the activation is not painless. There is a wound in the house of self, a wound around your right to exist boldly, to want what you want without apology, to lead rather than follow, to start rather than wait for permission. This wound has been sitting in Aries for years, and now the warrior has come home to look it directly in the face. The physical signs for Aries are the most intense of all 12 signs during this window. The adrenaline surges are real, the jaw clenching is real, the restless urgency is real. Do not medicate it, do not suppress it, channel it. Every ounce of that energy is raw material. The ritual at the end of this transmission was made for you first. Use it. Something you have been postponing, something you have been calling arrogance, or ambition, or unrealistic, is not any of those things. It is yours. And April 9th is the day you stop pretending otherwise. If your sun, moon, or rising sign is Libra, Mars has entered your 7th house. The house of one-on-one relationships, significant partnerships, open enemies, and the other. And it arrives not quietly. It arrives with Saturn, Neptune, Chiron, and the Sun in tow. This is an opposition. Mars in Aries directly faces Libra across the sky, and you feel that opposition as a kind of pressure building in your most important connections. Power dynamics that you have managed. Carefully, diplomatically, with characteristic Libra grace, are no longer content to be managed. They want resolution. The pattern that has been running beneath the surface of a key relationship, whether romantic, professional, or familial, is pushing toward the surface now with a force you cannot redirect with politeness or compromise. Chiron opposite your sign means the wound being activated is relational. It is the wound of having denied your own needs in order to maintain peace. It is the wound of having made yourself agreeable at the cost of making yourself invisible. Saturn opposite means the structure of certain relationships is being tested for real-world viability, not for how they feel, for whether they are built on truth. Neptune opposite means some of the stories you have told yourself about your partnerships, the idealized versions, the narratives where you stay by keeping things smooth, may not survive contact with the raw honesty that Mars demands. This does not mean your relationships end. It means they evolve, or they clarify. The ones that are real will become more real. The ones that were maintained through mutual avoidance will become impossible to maintain. For Libra, the physical symptoms during this window often manifest as tension in the lower back and kidneys, the body zones ruled by Libra, and as social anxiety, the sense that every interaction carries more weight than usual. That weight is real. Lean into honest conversation rather than away from it. The short-term discomfort of saying what is true is nothing compared to the long-term cost of another 2 years of strategic silence. If your sun, moon, or rising sign is Cancer, what you are navigating between now and the end of April is a square. Not the gentle encouragement of a trine, not the direct confrontation of an opposition. A square. A square is friction. A square is two energies that do not naturally align, being forced into the same space and made to work together. Mars in Aries squares Cancer from the angle of home, family, domestic authority, and emotional security. The frustrations you have been swallowing inside your household, the unspoken resentments, the dynamics of who holds power and who yields it, the silent agreements that have not actually been agreed to but simply assumed. These are cracking open. Cancer is the sign of protective enclosure, the shell, the careful preservation of what feels like home, but a shell that cannot open occasionally becomes a prison. Mars at 0 Aries, squared against your emotional core, is demanding that you identify the difference. Not destroy the home. Not abandon the family, but reclaim your authority within it. There is something specifically around the theme of being heard, of your emotional reality being taken seriously by the people inside your closest circles, that this transit is amplifying to a level you cannot continue to ignore. Saturn's involvement in the Aries stellium adds a structural dimension to this. The old way of managing the household dynamic, the old role you have been playing, is becoming untenable, not uncomfortable, untenable. Something has to change in how you occupy your own home. Physically, Cancer often experiences this Mars in Aries period as digestive disruption and chest tightness. The body mapping emotional suppression into the stomach and rib cage. The remedy is not digestive. It is expressive. Say the thing. In your most important domestic relationship, there is something waiting to be said. Not as an attack, as a reclamation. If your sun, moon, or rising sign is Capricorn, you are experiencing what might be the most structurally significant opposition of the year. Mars in Aries, the sign of raw, personal, identity-driven drive, is activating the axis of your chart that runs between self and career, between who you are at your most instinctive and who you are required to be within systems of authority and institutional expectation. You are, perhaps more than any other sign right now, feeling the sharpest version of a tension that may have been building for years. The tension between what the institution requires and what your body and gut are demanding. Capricorn builds systems. Capricorn climbs structures. Capricorn has often learned, at significant personal cost, to delay gratification, to behave strategically, to master the long game. And there is tremendous wisdom in that. But Mars at 0 Aries does not understand the long game. Mars at 0 Aries understands now. The conjunction with Neptune adds a dimension that Capricorn may find particularly disorienting. The sudden awareness that some of the structures they have been climbing are built on foundations that no longer feel solid. Not corrupt necessarily, but not solid. Neptune dissolves. And in the sign of raw beginnings, it is dissolving the assumption that the old institutional frameworks will continue to hold the same rewards they once promised. Chiron, in the Aries stellium, speaks to a wound that Capricorn carries specifically around ambition. The wound of having been told, directly or indirectly, that wanting to lead on your own terms was somehow inappropriate, aggressive, or premature. That wound is being excavated now, not to be reopened for suffering, to be finally, definitively closed. The action required of Capricorn during this window is the most difficult for this sign, to act from personal truth rather than strategic calculation, just once, in one area, not as a policy, as a test. Here is what you must not do during this window. Write this down if you need to. Because the energy of Mars in Aries at 0 degrees, conjunct Neptune, stacking on top of Saturn, Chiron, and the Sun, is among the most potent and most volatile combinations the sky can produce, and it will offer you temptations that feel like opportunities. The first is impulsive financial decisions. Mars in Aries wants to act now. It wants to bet big. It wants to invest in the exciting new thing before the window closes. Do not confuse urgency with wisdom. Mars conjunct Neptune specifically blurs the line between genuine opportunity and wishful thinking. A financial decision that feels divinely inspired during this window may simply feel inspired. Wait 72 hours before committing money to anything new. The second is starting unnecessary arguments or confrontations. The charge in the air during this period is real and physical, and you will feel provoked. You may be provoked. The question is not whether you have the right to respond. You do. The question is whether this confrontation serves your actual direction or merely releases pressure. Most arguments started during a Mars ingress are not about what they claim to be about. They are about the unprocessed energy looking for a channel. Find a better channel. The third is making permanent decisions out of frustration. Ending things, relationships, jobs, commitments. Because the energy is telling you to move is not the same as ending things because clarity is telling you to move. Mars in Aries produces the feeling of clarity. It does not always produce actual clarity. The test is simple. Does this decision arise from a sense of expansion and direction, or from a sense of pressure and escape? Expansion is real. Escape is temporary. The fourth is overexerting the body without preparation. Aries rules the physical initiatory impulse. You will want to run, to lift, to move aggressively. Do that. But warm up. Seriously, the adrenaline surging through your system right now can override your body's signals of discomfort until something gives. The body zone activated is the head, the face, the scalp, the jaw. Tension here means overextension. Listen before it speaks loudly. The fifth is reacting to social media provocation. There will be something in the next 10 days that you could respond to publicly in a way that feels satisfying in the moment and costly afterward. Mars at 0 Aries with Neptune nearby means the line between righteous expression and reactive impulse is almost invisible. Assume everything you feel compelled to post in anger during this window should wait 24 hours before being posted. The sixth is picking up habits that feel exciting because they feel like action. Cigarettes, drinking, impulsive spending, meaningless sexual encounters. These are all ways Mars energy can be discharged without direction. They satisfy the hunger for a moment. They do not feed the direction. Now here is what you do. On April 9th, between 3 in the afternoon and sunset wherever you are in the world, you are going to do something specific. You're going to sit down with a piece of paper, physical paper, not a phone, not a screen, and you are going to write down one thing, not a list, not a vision board. One single thing. The boldest intention you have been postponing. The one thing you have been calling impractical or arrogant or not the right time. The one thing your body already knows is true, but your mind has been managing on its behalf. Write it as a single action step, not a destination. Not become successful. That is a destination. Send the email to the person who can help me start this thing. That is an action step. Book the appointment I have been canceling for 6 months. That is an action step. Write it in present tense if you can. Write it as if it is already in motion. If you have a red candle, light it while you write. Red is the color of Mars, of activation, of the will brought into physical form. It is not essential, but it is not incidental either. When you have written the intention, read it aloud 3 times, not in your head, out loud, with your actual voice, into actual air, because Mars in Aries at 0 degrees is fundamentally about the embodied word. The intention that leaves the body and enters the world as vibration. 3 times because 3 is the number of completion in motion. 1 for the stating, 1 for the claiming, 1 for the sending, and then, before midnight on April 9th, take one small physical action toward what you wrote. Not the whole action, the first movement, an email, a text message, a registration, a single page written, a single phone call made, because Mars in Aries does not reward the most elaborate plan. It rewards the first step taken in the actual physical world. The first step is what opens the corridor. Everything that comes after follows from that one honest movement forward. The ritual is complete when you have moved, not when you have felt moved. When you have moved, you are standing at the edge of something that is larger than a single planetary transit. The Mars ingress into Aries on April 9th is the final activation of a stellium that has been building since early 2026. When Saturn and Neptune entered Aries together for the first time since the mid-1990s. The first time in an entire generation. What happened in your life between the early 90s and today is not accidental background. It is context. The unfinished questions from that era, about identity, about direction, about what you were actually here to build versus what you were told you should want, are alive inside this stellium. Saturn in Aries is restructuring the architecture of individual authority. A Neptune in Aries is dissolving the illusions that prevented people from seeing what they were actually capable of becoming. Chiron in Aries is excavating the specific wounds around the right to exist as a full, desiring, active human being. Wounds that run so deep in many people that they have mistaken them for personality traits. And now Mars arrives to give all of this direction. Force. Momentum. The general has returned to the front. This is not the beginning of chaos. It is the beginning of a sequence that leads somewhere specific if you are willing to move with it rather than resist it. The entire zodiac cycle begins at 0 Aries. Every story of initiation, in every culture, in every mythological tradition, begins with the same moment. A character who has been enduring something, a limitation, a wound, a long exile from their own power, encounters a threshold. And the threshold does not open from the outside. It opens because the character moves toward it, with enough truth and enough courage to make it real. You are at the threshold. The coming weeks will not be uniformly smooth. Mars conjunct Neptune on April 12th will produce a period of approximately 3 to 5 days, where the line between inspired action and confused impulse is genuinely difficult to navigate. You may start things in the wrong direction. You may feel drawn toward a vision that is not yet fully formed. That is not failure, that is the process. Neptune does not give you a clear map. It gives you a compass that points toward what is sacred to you, even when what is sacred to you is not yet fully visible. Trust the compass even when the map is obscured. Mercury will enter Aries on April 14th, adding the force of directed thought and speech to this already electric stellium. After April 14th, the ideas that have been forming in your body as impulse will begin to crystallize into language, into plans, into conversations that move things forward. Hold your most important announcements and communications until after April 14th if you can. Wait for Mercury to add its precision to the fire. The full activation sequence runs from April 9th through approximately April 20th. That is your window, not a lifetime, not a year. 11 days to let something real begin. 11 days to take the first step that everything else follows from. And the deepest truth at the center of this entire transmission is this: everything you have been swallowing. The ambition you renamed as arrogance to make yourself more acceptable. The anger you renamed as sensitivity to make yourself easier to manage. The desire you renamed as greed to make yourself less threatening is asking to be named. And not just named. Acted on. Mars at 0 Aries is the first breath of the zodiac wheel. It is the moment before thought. The moment before strategy. The moment before social calculation. It is the raw signal from the core of who you are before anyone else's voice has had the chance to modify it. That signal is not dangerous. What is dangerous is continuing to override it, because a signal that is suppressed long enough does not disappear. It finds other channels. It moves through the body as chronic tension and unexplained pain. It moves through relationships as resentment that cannot be traced to its source. It moves through careers as the muted, persistent awareness that you are performing a version of yourself that is strategically viable but not actually alive. Mars at 0 Aries, in the middle of the most densely packed stellium in decades, is the cosmos presenting you with something rare. Not a guarantee, not a shortcut, a legitimate opening. A moment when the frequency of the sky aligns with the frequency of your deepest initiatory impulse and says, now, not tomorrow, not after you have prepared more fully, not after you have made yourself more ready. Now. The ritual exists to give that now a physical form. The action step exists to make the now real rather than theoretical. Because what you were holding back is not something that was wrong with you. It was something that was waiting for the right moment to be released into the world as something constructive. That moment is April 9th, 3:36 in the afternoon, Eastern Time. 0 degrees Aries. The first degree of everything. You were not brought to this transmission by accident. Your instincts work. Trust them now more than you ever have. Move before midnight. And let what needs to begin, begin.